Good morning, hello, and welcome. On behalf of Garmin Aviation Training and the Garmin Aviation Training team, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We're inside of 2 weeks out to Oshkosh. I know everybody on the training team here is excited to head up to Oshkosh. There's a lot of new stuff that we're going to be kicking around. We've got some variations to some of our training that we've done in the past. Uh, Definitely, hopefully excited, and I hope everybody on this webinar today that joined up is excited. We hope to see everybody up there, but of course, to get there, we got to get there first. We got to fly up. We want to be able to fly that route, that Oshkosh Arrival, safely, effectively. There's going to be lots of air traffic, like every year. It's not the world's busiest airport for nothing. So that's really what we're going to focus on today is getting ourselves set up using different pieces of equipment that we have in the aircraft as well as our pre-flight planning to make sure that everything we do is all lined up, that when we go up there, we fly that arrival in, we're ready for it, we know what's going to happen, we've got our equipment set up, we know our fuel, what that's going to look like. We want to make sure that we're 100% before we jump into a very, very busy arrival. So that's really what we're going to focus on today. For those that are new that haven't been in any of our webinars, my name is Matthew Clark. I am one of our senior aviation pilot instructors here at Garmin. Actually, here in 2 weeks will be my 8-year mark with Garmin, and the last 6 years with the aviation training team. And we've taught everything from GTNs, GNS, G1000, G3 5000, Garmin Pilot, everything in between, you name it. Uh, I've been there personally flying aircraft since I was 9 years old, started off very young, taught for the University of Central Missouri as a flight instructor for them. And I still do some part-time flight instruction with the local flight school here in Kansas City. Commercial single, commercial multi-engine rated pilot, CFII, and I fly everything from 152s, 72s, Pipers, Cirrus, Bonanzas, Moonies, and a whole lot more beyond that too, but those are kind of the bigger airframes that I tend to fly the most. I also fly full time for a Part 91K, Part 135 operator flying PC-12s all around the country. So wide range of aircraft, wide range of performance characteristics, wide range of avionics. But a little enough about myself. Once again, we're not here talking about me. We're talking about Oshkosh. We're all excited to get there. I do have a couple housekeeping items that we're going to take care of first. First and foremost, as we're going through today's presentation, if you happen to have any questions, we highly encourage questions. We love to see what questions you have. We want to make sure any questions that you have gets answered timely and effectively. So if you do have any of those questions, feel free to use the questions box within the GoToWebinar platform. I do have a couple of colleagues with me standing by, ready to answer any questions you may have. So please ask those questions. If you do get a question either that doesn't get answered today, or if you have a question later down the road, feel free to email us here at aviationtraining.webinar@garmin.com. That's going to come straight to the training team. Once again, more than glad to answer any questions that you may have. In addition to that, we are recording this webinar about an hour or so. Once the webinar gets done, a link to that video recording should be automatically sent out to you. So if you do want to rewatch anything, maybe there's something that you missed initially, you can go back and rewatch that as many times as you would like to. Give it a few hours here, 2 or 3 hours. If something doesn't send to your email and you do want a copy of that link, then shoot us an email here and we'll make sure we get that link to you. The other end, once the webinar is done, at the end of all of our webinars, we do have a survey. We do like any sort of feedback that you have. What did you like? What did you not like? Do you have ideas and topics and suggestions for future webinars? What other training would you like to see? We definitely take that feedback. We like to see what other pilots want to see and try to tailor our training content that way. All right. Well, in the last one we have here, a little legal side. We throw at all of our presentations. Here, we're not here to tell you how to fly your aircraft. We're not here, also not here to replace any other guides, service bulletins, service alerts, flight manual supplements. We're here to complement those resources. But what we will do is show you some different ways that you can or potentially use your avionics to try to get a little bit more out of it. especially for the sake of today's topic. We're flying into Oshkosh. There's a lot of stress. We're VFR. We need to be looking out and monitoring for other traffic, but we definitely have a lot of equipment on board that could potentially help us and keep us safe. So we're going to show some different ways to show some of that. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and press forward with today's presentation. We're going to start off with some pre-flight documentation. Now, this is not the catch-all, end-all. There's a lot of great resources out there as we're flying into Oshkosh. EAA has a number of phenomenal resources. I'm going to reference back to some of their resources here because why reinvent the wheel? They've got a lot of good information. Highly encourage you to take a look at that. But we are going to take a look at some pre-flight documentation, some things you're going to want to take a look through, read through, as well as some things you're going to want to have printed out and ready to go. So we'll take a quick look at the notice, the 23 Oshkosh notice. We'll take a look at some couple documents that I recommend and suggest that you have printed out and easily accessible. And then we'll talk about some Garmin Pilot, things that we can do within Garmin Pilot that can help us getting ourselves set up, as well as some different documents there that we can have and standby and ready to go as well. From there, then we're going to go more into the pre-flight, or more aggressively into the pre-flight side of things, from setting up Garmin Pilot, getting the route loaded in, making sure we've got different overlays turned on or turned off, making sure that everything we have is what we want. And then from there, we'll go into a little bit of the flight plan setup, going into both GTN and G3X. How do we get the flight plan loaded up? How can we use some tools and resources to help us there? Make sure that what we're getting ourselves ready to fly is going to really, truly effectively help us. If we are flying with anything like G1000 or G3 5000, what we're going to show here is going to be very similar, slightly different way to input them in, but same principles are still going to apply. So with that said, we're going to start off with some pre-flight documentation, some things that you want to have. You want to take your time, read through some things that you want to have printed off, ready to go, and easily accessible inside the aircraft, and trying to get ourselves prepped and ready as best as we can. First and foremost, we can't talk about flying the Oshkosh Arrival without taking a look at the Oshkosh 2023 notice. I think last year, I want to say they changed it from the NOTAM to the notice. Everybody still tends to call it the NOTAM, but make sure that we're taking a look at this this resource here, and we want to make sure that everything that we're looking at is up to date. We know what we're getting ready to go into, and we also want to make sure that we're familiar with any and all these changes that are going to apply to us. The great two examples, they always throw it right on the front of the notice itself. In this case, the Fond du Lac diversion procedure has been removed, and if you're flying an ultralight in, the ultralight pattern change. So there's a couple minor changes. Every year they modify around, they try to make the arrival and more efficient, more safe. So we want to make sure that that we're up to date, we know what's going on. We're not trying to rely exclusively on data that could be 2-3 years old. So take your time, read through the notice. This is a free download off EAA's website. I would highly recommend downloading it, and I would go off and actually have a hard printed copy of this and have it readily accessible in the aircraft. If you need to reference it, you can grab it quickly. It's not back, you don't want it back in your flight bag or in your bags in the back of the aircraft, but maybe up front and on the pockets, make sure that it's ready to go. EAA actually has a rather amusing video of a pilot trying to fly the Oshkosh Arrival. He left the notice on the ground, and he starts calling Fisk approach. He starts calling the tower to figure out how the heck to fly the approach. Not exactly something that you want to do. You definitely want to make sure you have this with you, that you've read through it, that you know what's going on prior to actually flying the Arrival. So have that ready to go. Here, there's actually, I do have a couple QR codes. The right hand is a direct link to the Oshkosh 2023 NOTAM. If you haven't already downloaded it, grab your phone, you can grab that QR link. If not, you can go to EAA's website or Google it up, and you should be able to find that link through that notice pretty quick and easy. On there are a number of phenomenal resources. One here, the other one I've got referenced is an NTSB safety alert that actually talks about flying in and out of major events, not specifically set for Oshkosh, but applies to Oshkosh, applies to Sun and Fun, any other big air, big major flying event. It's got some great resources in there. EAA also has a really great video series, especially if this is your first time flying the Oshkosh Arrival. They actually have a video of them flying the entire Arrival, what it's going to look like outside the aircraft as you're flying. So definitely highly recommend taking a look at those if you're unfamiliar with this whole area. Help you get yourself established, know what you're getting ready to fly into, know what those major landmarks are going to look like. Any and all resources like that are vital. So take your time, go through all those resources that they have, and you'll be in good shape there. Some other documents that you definitely want to have printed off are going to be your arrival and departure signs. The Oshkosh notice actually does specify they wanted printed out paper copies of all of these signs. Just typing this up on a tablet is not going to suffice. You get the get the sun hitting the aircraft just right, the windscreen just right. The ground crew may not even be able to see those signs. So make sure that make sure you have these signs printed off and ready to go. You can type these up yourselves, or if you use that QR code there. Oshkosh or EAA has these signs already pre-made, so you could just print them off and go. It could be for the FBO if that's where you're going to be going. You're going to the general aviation parking or general aviation camping, have that sign. And same as for your departure. Your VFR, if your IFR departure out, you want these signs prepped, pre-flighted, ready to go. In fact, I'd probably have my little folder up front in the aircraft with the notice, and then the other side I'd have these signs up there. New signs for this year are the requested parking signs. So if you're wanting to go to the North 40 or the South 40, you could print these signs off and have that displayed next to your general aviation parking or general aviation camping signs. It's not a guarantee, and it's maybe a little hard to see on the screen, but if you take a look at it, it'll even say they are not guaranteed. The ground crews there will do their best to get you to that appropriate spot. But you can request where you want to go. So that's something new for this year. Now, I love the saying, and it's an old one now. Two is one is none. So if you just have a single paper copy and something happens to it, what happens if you do wind up leaving it on the ground? What happens if it gets wet? What happens if you packed it somewhere and you forgot about it? Well, I always like to have a backup copy somewhere. And this is where Garmin Pilot can really come into play here as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my Garmin Pilot app here, and you can kind of see me. We'll walk along as we do some things live within the application itself. Garmin Pilot, definitely a wealth of information there. I use this quite a bit for my pre-flight planning. I'm looking at NOTAMs, I'm looking at AirMets and SIGMETs. We'll talk to that here in just a minute, how we can get those on. But we do have a Documents tab. And down on mine at the very bottom center, I do have a Documents tab. And this has a lot of great resources in here. If you want, you can load up custom documents that you have from a different cloud storage provider. For example, I use Google Drive. So if I look in my drive, there's a number of different documents that I personally loaded up. If you link this to your drive or to your other cloud provider, a standalone folder is going to be generated in the drive. All you have to do is drag and drop into that, and then you can view it here. Here I've got some pilot training manuals, I've got some instrument flying patterns, and a couple different guides there that I want to have quick access to in the aircraft. Yes, you could download the Oshkosh notice, plop it up onto your cloud provider, and then you could view it in Garmin Pilot here, and that would work just fine. However, there are some other options. Like for example, I've got an FAA folder, a document, and I've created an EAA folder specifically for Oshkosh. For the FAA folder, I've got what I would consider important docs like a VFR chart legend, IFR load legends, chart supplements, user guides, things that I want to have quick access to in case I have a question on anything. So these are great resources, but you can create your own. For example, if I do want to create my own folder, all I have to do is hit the Add button in the upper right-hand corner, and there I can add a cloud provider. I could add just a file, or I could add a folder which case I could name it, type it, do whatever is going to make the most sense for me there. And then from there we can add it. I'm going to go ahead, and since I've already created it, I'm going to go into my EAA folder, and from here you can see I've already downloaded the Oshkosh Notice. Again, I like having multiple copies. I don't like having one single point of failure. Once you've created your folder, all we need to do in this case is select the catalog, and you can see there's a lot of different resources that are available out there, from flightplan.com and pilot release notes. There's Australia documents, Canada documents, there's FAA documents, and I'm going to come back to that here in a moment, but all their handbooks, their NOTAMs, their chart supplements, all that data you can find there. Then you can even find Garmin manuals, and that's never a bad option as well. We know we want to have paper copies of all of our manuals in the aircraft, but if I want a digital version, well, I've got that. I don't have to go try to download it off our website and then add it somewhere else. I could pick one here and go to town. But I am going to go back up here, and you'll notice inside of the FAA documents, there's already the Oshkosh NOTAM. So I can select that, and I can see it's downloaded. I can see what version it is, how big that file is. I've got all the data there that I need. I would just select it, press done, and the NOTAM is automatically going to download, or whatever document you happen to select. This is a great resource there. From here, I can touch on it, and I can bring up the entire Oshkosh NOTAM, or the notice, excuse me. You're going to hear me say notice and NOTAM. I'm referring to the same thing here. Some habits still die hard there. But I can swipe left and right, and I can zoom in, zoom out. I can read whatever I need to off the notice. But I can scroll through, and it is the entire notice as we go through. If you are going to have a printed out copy, what I would recommend is tabbing the important pages on there, putting some sort of a mark, some way to get to those quick access items if you need it. Inside of Pilot, we can do that exact same thing. For example, if I want to come over and I want to bookmark this because it has the arrival ATIS, it has Fisk approach frequency, and I've got the route from Ripon to Fisk. We'll say I want to be able to quickly access this. On the upper right-hand corner, I can press the bookmark tab, and now this page has been bookmarked. The advantage of that, not only is it going to show me the entire list of all the bookmarks that I have, but I can access that from anywhere inside the Documents folder. So for example, if I go back to my main Documents page, I've got all of it. Instead of having to go into the right folder and then clicking the right document, I can select the bookmarked page, and then I can quickly access that one particular page. So if there is something that I need to reference, I can get to it quickly and effectively. Keep that in mind. We want to be able to, if we want to have the notice read up, we want to be familiar with it. But if I need to reference something, I want to get to it as fast as I humanly possibly can. This is going to be the best route for us to do there. Other thing, well, I'll come back to that here in just a minute. We've talked about, so there's all sorts of different things that you can bookmark. You can save it, use it, have it as a resource. That being said, I don't want to rely strictly on my tablet or within Garmin Pilot for that NOTAM. Just yesterday I was flying with a student and his tablet overheated. It's the middle of summer. If you have that tablet out and it's in direct sunlight, they can overheat. If this is your only source for this NOTAM or for this notice, well, you're out of luck at this point. So that's where having a paper copy, having it on a mobile device, if you have anybody else that's flying with you, maybe put it on their device as well. Have multiple copies in case you need it. Again, 2 is 1, 1 is none. All right, so we're going to kick forward a little bit here. One thing I did not talk about is inside of Garmin Pilot, we do have the ability to pin different items down to that taskbar down below. Box out of the way. So for example, right now on mine, I have maps, flight plan, airport charts, documents, and I have my scratch pad all down at the bottom. These are pages that I use just about every single flight. If you press and hold on any one of those items, you'll see they'll start shaking. You'll see a list of all the different other pages that are going to appear. I can take a different page, drag it, and have it pinned to that taskbar. That way, I've got quick, easy access to that page if I need it. For example, we're getting ready to fly in Oshkosh. There's going to be traffic. I could drag the traffic item. Maybe I want to replace the scratch pad. I can put it where that scratch pad was, and now traffic is pinned to my taskbar. So now when I press done, if I want to get to my traffic page, all I need to do is press traffic. Now I'm to the traffic page. If I want to go back to documents, I can press documents. These are quick items, quick things that you can grab quickly and effectively. So is there a right or a wrong setup with it? Not necessarily. Could I press on the more button and then select the appropriate page? Absolutely. That will work just fine. But if there are certain pages that you know you're going to want to have, or you're thinking you may be interfacing with, pin those pages down at the bottom and make sure that you are set and ready to go. All right, so we've taken a look at some of the documentation, things that we're going to want to look at prior to flying, prior to getting in the aircraft and flying to Oshkosh. Now let's take a look a little bit of our pre-flight route, pre-flight planning, making sure that we have our avionics set up, make sure that our route's saved, that we know what we're getting into there. First and foremost, let's take a quick high-level overview of the Oshkosh Arrival, especially for those that are not familiar with it, or maybe it's been a few years. Traditionally, the Oshkosh Arrival has started at Ripon. You could type in an IFR waypoint and go to town. They've obviously replaced all those with visual reporting points or visual waypoints. That's why you see VP RIP. When you get to Fisk, there's going to be VP Fisk. So they've added some in there. I want to say last year, they also added a number of new start points, starting with the Endeavor Bridge, and it's there VP ENV, Puckaway Lake, VP PLK, VP Green, and then ultimately joining back up to Ripon. You're not necessarily going to start all the way at the Endeavor Bridge, but you might. It's going to depend on how much traffic is coming in and coming out. One of the things you're going to want to do when you get airborne is pull up the Oshkosh ATIS to see which start point. They're going to announce which start point you're working off of. That's where you're going to want to start your Oshkosh Arrival at. So, for example, if there is a little bit more traffic, instead of starting at Ripon, they could be starting you at VP Green, at Green Lake. Okay, we want to make sure that that's in our flight plan. We're ready to go. And the more traffic there is, the further back we're going to start the arrival. So pay attention to what the ATIS says and plan accordingly. The rest of the arrival is going to look fairly similar. You're going to go over VP RIP. You're going to follow the railroad tracks up to and past Pickett, working our way up to VP Fisk. Once again, VP RIP, VP Fisk, these are waypoints that are in your navigators, so you can load this into your flight plan and have some additional situational awareness. Yes, this is a VFR arrival that we're coming into, but any bit of extra guidance that can help keep our situational awareness, keep us more or less on track where we're supposed to be, is a good thing. Once you get over once you get over Fisk, then a controller on the ground is going to tell you which route they want you to go, whether you're going to Fisk Avenue and then working your way into whichever runway they have you going to, or going up the railroad track. Just depends on what transition they happen to be flying that day. Now, this is all stuff we can sort of prep for ahead of time. We know the entire route, and that's really where I'm going to start. I'm always going to plan on the worst case scenario. Say that we needed to go start off at the Endeavor Bridge and work our way through the entire route. So I want to I want to plan that. I'm going to work my fuel planning around that. I'm going to have the entire route loaded into my flight plan, and I can start with Garmin Pilot. So I'm going to bring my Garmin Pilot app back up, and we're going to build the arrival all the way into our flight plan here. So I'm going to start by touching the box at the very top. You could also go down to flight plan, type the route in. Either way is perfectly acceptable. I personally like to bring the top down menu. That's just my preference as a pilot. For this sake, we're going to say we're starting our way off at KDLL, the Wisconsin Dells Regional Airport. And I'm going to say that's our start point. That's where we're going to gas up. Want to make sure we have plenty of fuel flying into the arrival in case we need to either break off the arrival and start again. Maybe we need to hold depending on how much air traffic there is. So we're going to start off fairly close there. From there, I'm going to touch at the top, and you can do this a couple different ways. I could hit touch on add en route waypoint and type each waypoint in manually. But if I know the entire sequence, I prefer to go to that top bar and just type the entire route in. To me, it's a little bit faster, a little more efficient. So we're going to start with the Endeavour Bridge waypoint. That's going to be VPENV, Echo November Victor. And as I see down low, or right above my keyboard, is our fast find. It's already starting to guess which waypoint we're talking about based on what I'm typing. And as I go in, VPEN, well, I see there's 3 waypoints there. The Endeavour Bridge is that middle one, VPENV. So that's what I'm going to select, and that's automatically added into my flight plan. So it's a way that you can kind of speed up. You're not having to type every single letter of it. You can speed that process up just a little bit. Next is going to be Puckaway Lake. So I'll do VPPLK. Once again, I'm looking at my fast find, and I've only typed 3 letters. Fast find's found the waypoint that I want. So we'll do VP Puckaway Lake. And this is where we can actually have a little bit of fun. If I go back a couple slides on my presentation, you're going to notice between Puckaway Lake and Green Lake, you're staying south of the Puckaway Lake, but then the route changes. My flight plan wise, if I just go from Puckaway Lake straight to Green Lake, well, I'm going to fly over the lake. They don't want me to. I could be cutting off another aircraft. I could be getting closer to somebody else. And you notice that turn is not a waypoint. However, we can still work with that. So if I want to build that into my flight plan, what I'm going to do is I could try to figure out what the Latin long is. I could try to figure out if there's a radial distance based off of VOR. There's a lot of hard ways we can do that. I'm going to say I'm lazy with that. There's a lot easier and more efficient ways to do this. So one of those, I'm going to get rid of my flight plan for a minute. I'm going to zoom in, and I can see there's Puckaway Lake on Garmin Pilot. We know right around there near Marquette is where that course is going to change to get me over to VP Green. In fact, I can actually see VP Green on the map right next to Green Lake. But if I touch right on the map, I can pinpoint where do I want that user waypoint. On the right, or excuse me, the left-hand side of that radio window, there's going to be a flag with a green icon, a little green circle. If I touch that, that is going to allow me to create a user waypoint. I can name it whatever I want. Let's say I call it the Puckaway waypoint. I'm just making something that I can reference back to. I can add a comment if I want to. I can change the bearing type, lat long, bearing distance, radial. For the sake of this, I don't really care. I've already named it what I want, and I'm going to save it. And I can automatically see on the map is that orange icon, that orange dot. That's my user waypoint that I built. When I go back into my flight plan, this is a case where I would use the add en route waypoint, because instead of having to remember what I named it and try to type it out, I can select the user field on the right side, and I can see all the user waypoints that I've created. So I can select the Puckaway Lake waypoint, and it's automatically added into my flight plan. From here, I could continue hitting the add en route waypoint. I'm going to go back up to my bar up the top and just continue typing out the waypoints. Once again, I find it a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient. From here, we'll type in VP Green, and we can kind of continue our process on. We'll go then VP Rip over for Ripon, and then VP Fisk for the Fisk intersection. And last but not least, we'll end it with Oshkosh. Now, you could add a whole lot more user waypoints in there if you want. We had a pilot a couple of years ago that in one of our bonanzas wound up creating about 50 or 60 user waypoints to just had a whole flight plan of these waypoints to get him into Oshkosh. For that pilot, that worked beautifully. In fact, all the other pilots that were flying that route kept pulling that same route, kept pulling that same flight plan up over and over, and that had a lot more additional guidance. If you want to do that, you absolutely can. You can continue doing what we did here, creating those user waypoints, making your life much more efficient, much more simplified. The other advantage, if you're flying an aircraft that either has connects like G3X Touch, or if you have a Flightstream 510, Flightstream 210 interface to your panel, then you could send this entire flight plan over to that panel, including those user waypoints. And now you don't have to retype all this data in again. It's already going to be loaded in the flight plan, ready to go. So that's one advantage to building this here on Garmin Pilot. You can potentially spend less time in the aircraft having to duplicate all these efforts. Other things you're going to want to do, or I recommend, is saving this flight plan into your stored catalog. You've done the work. Instead of having to type this every single time, what I'm going to do is right next to my route at the top, I can click on that icon and I can actually store a flight plan. I've got a couple stored that I do for common training routes, but what I can do here is I'm going to press add, and I can see at the very bottom of my flight plan list, going from Dells over to Oshkosh, and it's got all my routes in there saved. So if I'm planning this ahead of time, I can load my flight plan, I can save it, it's ready to go. I can then do any other flying I need to do, but when I'm ready to fly and pick this route up again, well, I can go back to my stored catalog, load that route, and I'm ready to go. So much faster, much simpler way to make this work for us. Other things we want to start looking at here are going to be our weight, our fuel planning, our times, what is this going to do for us? And Garmin Pilot can actually help us there as well. So that's one of the big things we want to do. What's our required fuel going to be for the route? We would definitely want to anticipate having to restart. Let's say we get too close to a target and for a traffic in front of us, or ATC sends us back around. What if we have to hold? Obviously, we don't want to fly into Oshkosh running minimum fuel. We want to make sure that we've got plenty of fuel to get us there and to get us on the ground safely and efficiently. So if we go back to Garmin Pilot, my app, one of the routes or items we can do is selecting perf. And this is where we can actually kind of figure out what's our manifold pressure potentially going to be, what's our RPM setting that we want, all depending on the aircraft, depending on what you loaded into Garmin Pilot. In this particular case, I've got Skyline November 2662 Foxtrot loaded into my Garmin Pilot catalog, and I can use the resources here to help me. Are the wheel fairings removed? Yes or no? That's obviously going to affect our true airspeed. On the right-hand side, I can see a different list of manifold pressure and RPM settings. That's going to change our ETEs and our fuel burn. That being said, this is only going to go down so low. We do know we need to be at 90 knots at 1,800 feet as we work our way in. So we got to do a little bit of interpolation for some of that, but we can change that. We can modify. We can tell what our initial fuel is going to be. Down under the true airspeed, typically the settings that you're going to see are not going to let me get that slow, but I can manually type that speed in, which is what I've done here. And then it's typically going to tell you what your fuel burn is. I always like to plan on a higher fuel burn just in case. Gives me a little extra safety margin. Let's say going into something like this where we definitely want extra fuel. And I can see at the bottom what the total distance is, the estimated time en route, and what the required fuel is going to be. So in this case, at 90 knots and planning, let's call it 15 gallons an hour, that's going to say my required fuel is going to be 13.3 gallons. Obviously, I want extra gas on board the aircraft. That way, if I do need to restart, I've got plenty of fuel to come back in, or if I need to hold, I've got some time to play with. The other side is looking at the altitude. I can select different altitudes, knowing that in this case, the lowest altitude is going to let me select 1,500 feet. That's going to be the closest I can get to that 1,800 foot margin that I'm looking for. So should give me a pretty good idea of what we're going to go fly and what we should be expecting as we work our way on in. Things that you'll need to obviously answer for yourselves are going to be what's your minimum fuel to start the arrival. So if you're coming from an airport further away, what is your minimum fuel to start? Knowing that you may have to divert, you may have to go around, you may have to start over or hold. The other thing to think about is what's your minimum fuel or bingo fuel to say, hey, I'm not getting in, I need to go divert, gas up before I try it again. Yeah, this is not an answer. These are not answers I can answer for you. Something you're going to have to think about yourselves. It's going to vary based on the aircraft you're flying, your fuel burns, all that sort of stuff. But think about that. You don't want to be in the arrival and realize, oh crap, I'm getting way too low on fuel, and now we have a fuel emergency. So know what your minimum fuel is before you say, hey, I'm going to divert, land, gas up, and try again. Other things in Garmin Pilot to look at. If I go down to my bottom right-hand corner, the menu icon, prior to getting out to the aircraft, obviously we want to look at weather. We want to know what we're getting into. That's where I'm going to say, let's make sure we've got our radar turned on. I always turn on my lightning. AirMet, SIGMET could be a great option. Definitely want to have traffic, TFRs. NOTAMs are not a bad item either. These are typical items that I always leave on in Garmin Pilot. That way, when I zoom out just a little bit, I know what I'm getting into. I know where the NOTAMs are. I know where, if there's any TFRs that are going to be en route. I want to know what we're getting into. So this is going to help with that pre-flight planning. And these are same items that you can have turned on in flight. If you have SiriusXM or FSB weather feeding to Garmin Pilot, then you can also display that data on there, in effect giving yourself another multifunction display that you can work with to help keep your situational awareness. So keep all of that in mind. All right, now we're going to take a look at the GTN side of things here for those that are running GTNs. If you're running a GNS 43530, you're running a G1000, very similar options, and I would actually fly these very, very similar to one another. Just keep in mind your interface is going to be just a little bit different. But we can load the same route, the same flight plan into our Navigator and have it ready to go. So if I bring up our GTN trainer, bear with me here, shut off on me. Now, as I've said earlier, if you do have a Flight Stream 510, Flight Stream 210, yes, you can absolutely push the flight plan from Garmin Pilot up to your panel, and I would highly recommend doing so. You don't have to type the entire route again. Why would you? No need to duplicate efforts. If you don't, then we can just type it in, and it's still fairly fast, fairly efficient to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our flight plan, and you can see we're starting once again the Barrow, Wisconsin Dells Regional Airport. All I need to do at this point is start typing the waypoints. I'm starting it, and once again, I would start from the Endeavor Bridge. Just have the full route loaded in there. So we'll start with that. I add waypoint. We'll do the Endeavor Bridge, VPENV. In fact, it's already starting to make the fast find is making a solid guess. And then there it is, VPENV. That's the closest V or a waypoint that starts with V, so it's making its educated guess. This is going to help you. So instead of typing the entire waypoint, I can use fast find to add it to my flight plan, and I can speed up my data entry. The next waypoint for us is going to be VPPLK, that's Puckaway Lake. So once again, I'll add a waypoint, V, and it's starting to make an educated guess. We're probably not going to the Endeavor Bridge twice, so it's already made the second guess to the VP Lake. Now this is where we can have some fun. We talked about originally, after the VP Lake, there is that slight turn in your arrival path. This is where a user waypoint comes in really handy. Well, GTN, G3X can do the exact same thing. We can create a user waypoint to make sure we're flying the proper route. Now, a couple of ways we can do that. I can go back into my utilities. I can create, or my waypoint page. I can create a user waypoint. Then I got to remember what I named it, get it added into the flight plan. A lot of button pressing left and right. Once again, I may or may not know what that long is. And if I don't, I got a lot harder work to do. But there is an easy way to handle this. What I'm going to do is start with the add waypoint. I'm just going to type in a name. I'm going to treat the same waypoint like I did earlier. We'll do puck waypoint or type something in there. Big thing we want to look for is that it says no matches found. There's no matches found. The fast find didn't come up with anything. This is what I want to see. When I press enter, then it's going to ask me, hey, I don't know what you're trying to type. I don't know what you're referencing, but I can create a user waypoint for you. That's exactly what we want to do. So I'll create a user waypoint, and it's going to default to your current aircraft position. Well, obviously that's not what we want. I don't know what the lat long is. I don't know the radial and distance off the Bell's VOR, but that's okay. With GTN, I can move this map. I can zoom in and zoom out, and I can find the waypoint that I want. In fact, I already start seeing it. I see there's, go back to it, VP Lake, there's VP Green, there's Puckaway Lake right on my map. So what I can do is move the map around and place the pointer, place that waypoint spot right where I want it. I didn't type in anything. I didn't type a radial distance. I didn't type a lat long. I let the GTN do the hard work for me. So once I've got the waypoint where I want it, all I need to do is hit create. Not only is that user waypoint in the exact spot that I want it, but it automatically was added to my flight plan. So I hit add waypoint, I type the name that wasn't in the nav database, and I could custom build that waypoint out. Everything else that we're going to do is the same, exactly what we did on Garmin Pilot. So I'll add waypoint. Next is going to be VP Green. Once again, Fast Find is helping us. It's building that route sequentially for us there. After that is going to be VP RIP. This time, I have to do an extra letter or two. Okay, there's VP RIP. Then we're going to go VP FIS. And there it is. There's VP FIS. So it's making an educated guess as to where we're going to be going. And we're going to ultimately end that at Oshkosh. Okay, OSH, and there's Whitman Regional. We're set, ready to go. You can do this exact same thing for any of the hold patterns. You could create a hold pattern and then save it into your flight plan. I'd recommend doing that here as well. Saving your flight plan, go down to the menu button down at the bottom of your screen, and then we're going to store. And that's going to save that into your flight plan, especially if you're trying to do this ahead of time. When you do get out to the aircraft, you can go to your catalog, load that route up very quickly, very easily. You can do this, as we said, the same thing for any of the different holding patterns for the Rush Lake, Green Lake, Puckaway Lake hold. Downside there is once you get at the last waypoint in there, you're going to have to reestablish your direct to the initial point of that hold, but that's still something that can give you some additional guidance to make sure you know where you're going. Other options that you can do within the GTN is you can build in some VNAV. You can have the VNAV help you get down to the proper altitude. You can also make sure that it's pointing to the right direction. So for example, let's say you call up, you listen to the ATIS, they're not starting it at the Endeavor Bridge, but let's say they're starting it at VP Green. Well, I've got the entire route loaded. I'm not going to worry about deleting anything out of the flight plan. All I'm going to do is select the appropriate waypoint, in this case, VP Green, select the Direct To button, and activate. When I look at my map, if I zoom out just a hair, I can see now I'm going direct to VP Green, and then it's going to continue on with the rest of the route. If I look at my CDI bar down at the bottom, I've got direct to VP Green, then over to VP RIP. So I know I've got proper sequencing. It's going to do what I want, fly the direction I want. Other item that we can do while we're in here, we know we need to be at 1,800 feet. We know we need to be at 90 knots. Well, I don't want to get the 1,800 feet right at VP Green. I want to be established, trimmed out, ready to go prior to reaching that. So what I can do, this is where VNAV can actually help us. I'm going to select VP Green. I'm going to select the altitude box right next to that waypoint. And here, I can type in the altitude that I want. We'll type in 1,800 feet MSL, press the enter button. Now, as I said, I don't want to get to 1,800 feet right at the waypoint. I want to be there established, trimmed out, ready to go prior. So this is where an along track offset can come into play. I want to do -3, but I want to be at 1,800 feet, 3 miles prior to VP Green. That way I can get the aircraft trimmed out, power settings set, get the aircraft stabilized prior to starting the arrival. I'm going to press enter and save. In this case, instead of going to VP Green, I'm actually going to do my direct to my along track offset Now I'm direct to my 3-mile offset, and then it goes to VP green, and the rest of the route is going to continue the same. The advantage here, I now have VNAV guidance to make sure that I'm at 1,800 feet where I need to be, allowing me to get the aircraft stabilized and ready to go. So a lot of tools that are built into the GTN that can help us get the aircraft prepped, set, ready to go. Other things that we're going to want to take a look at, make sure that you've got any appropriate overlays turned on that you want. For example, I always leave traffic on, but maybe I want my NextRad on. Maybe I need terrain on. Or maybe not as much, but turning on traffic, turning on NextRad, these are some great options to help get the aircraft set, to help us keep our situational awareness, keep ourselves from interfering or getting too close to any other traffic targets that may be flying in there. So make sure that all of this stuff is set prior to departing out. Just take the extra minute, make sure your avionics are set and ready to go. This really comes into our panel setup. Depending on the displays that you have, maybe having a dedicated traffic page is not a bad option. You go to home, you will have the option to pull up a traffic page, but it's just going to depend on your settings. Like I said, I always keep the traffic on my map page. So that helps me keep my big picture situational awareness. If you have multiple screens in your aircraft, we just have more choices. For example, here's Garmin's Mooney. A fairly similar setup, or at least the way I set my aircraft up. My MFD, this happens to be our TXI flight display. I always keep my MFD as a close range map. What's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 minutes. I can always leave my NextRad on. I have my traffic turned on. I've got a zoomed in picture of what's an immediate threat right around the aircraft. If I look at my 750 in this aircraft, I typically will keep that as a longer range map. Still keeping traffic on, keeping my NextRad on, but I can see bigger picture what's going on around me. Maybe that traffic on the left hand side is more efficient to me, but maybe there are storms that are going to be chasing us in. I want to keep an eye on those. Still a risk factor, so I can put that on another display. If you have a 650 like we do in this aircraft, I typically will wind up leaving that as a default nav page, but this could also be a great page that you could turn and have set as a dedicated traffic page. We know traffic is going to be a big risk factor for us, so having that dedicated display up there help us pinpoint the traffic target coming in may not be a bad thing. Now, that's just how I would set up the aircraft. This is by no means how you have to set your plane up. It's all going to depend on what equipment you have in the aircraft and what you want to see and where. Keep in mind, if you have a tablet, you're running Garmin Pilot, well, great. That's another screen for you. You can pull up a traffic page on that. You can keep a big picture situational awareness there if you need. There's not a right, there's not a wrong. The big point I'm trying to get to is make sure that you set the aircraft up, your panel is set up, your tablet is set up the way you want. That way when you're getting into the arrival, you're not fiddling around with other pages, you're not having to change back and forth. You've got the data that you need. All you have to do is look at a different screen. Much faster, much more efficient that way. For those that are running G3X, and we're going to talk just G3X by itself. If you have a G3X with a GTN, well, you're going to load everything on the GTN like we just did. If you have this standalone G3X or VFR only, we can load it the same way. We're going to go into our flight plan. We're going to load those same waypoints. I can create the user waypoint very similarly to what we just did on the GTN. Everything is going to stay the same. Everything is going to apply. And then you can store this flight plan. Once you have it loaded, you would hit the menu button on your display, and you could save this into your flight plan catalog. Once again, having it ready to pull up if you need it. And the same sort of deal. Once you get airborne, listen to the ATIS. They're starting you at VP green. I'll do the exact same thing I did on the GTN. I would touch the VP green waypoint, press direct to, activate. Now I'm direct to that waypoint. The rest of my flight plan is going to continue sequencing like normal. But having the whole route there gives you options, and it's one less thing you have to worry about when you get airborne once you pick up that ATIS. And the same deal as well, looking at the panel setup, making sure that we have our avionics set properly. On this case here, I could put a dedicated traffic page on my MFD, but I could put other data on a different display or tablet or elsewhere. In fact, that's actually what I've done here. This is our Garmin's 182. That's November 2662 Foxtrot. I've got, once again, my MFD is set up as a close range map with NextRad and traffic turned on. And those overlays are accessible via the menu button on the display itself. On the right hand side on that 750, I still keep my long range map. And the 650, I actually in this case have set to a dedicated traffic page. So I could get a little bit more range information. Where should I be looking to find that target? If you do have another pilot with you, and you notice this aircraft does have another G3X touch display, well, this is where if you have somebody else flying with them or flying with you, put them to work. Have a traffic page pulled up there. Have them as your traffic spotter. And once again, you're using any and all resources available to avoid any traffic and keep yourself flying the safe, proper route. Last little bit here, if you're flying with either a GFC 500 or GFC 500X, the experimental one, then this is where we can actually go in and we can use one of the different modes on there. In this case, track mode. Now, most pilots are going to say we're flying heading mode. ATC tells you to fly heading, you go into heading. Downside heading, that's not accounting for wind drift. If you're using track, that's going to keep your constant ground track. It doesn't care what the nose is doing. It's just going to keep you on that same spot over the ground. So this could be an alternate means to fly your way in on the Oshkosh Arrival. Set your track, and you're going to see when you go into track mode on the Autopilot, your CDI, your heading bug, is actually going to get replaced with, if it goes from cyan to magenta. When you see it go magenta, now you are flying a ground track. So this could be another great option to help fly and keep you where you're supposed to be. This is also a potential option for flying any of the holding patterns. All you have to do, set that line, set the track where you want the aircraft to go, and that's where it's going to go. Doesn't matter what the wind is doing, it's going to keep you over that constant specific ground track. So once again, not a right, not a wrong, just different ways to use potentially some of the equipment we have on board the aircraft. All right. Well, that is going to bring us up towards the end of our seminar today. If you want more training, we definitely have training going on at Oshkosh this year. We're going to have a number of G3X Touch Academy seminars. Both are going to be some maintenance as well as some pilot seminars. We're also going to have some GTN and Autopilot seminars in our other tent. We'll have a listing of all those seminars here in just a second. We do, if you kind of like what you saw here, we do have a 2.5-hour course that we do 2 times a day. We have a morning and an afternoon session. Those are available off flygarmin.com/training. That is a paid for training. In years past, we've traditionally done this over at the Hilton Garden Inn. We are changing that this year. We are actually going to be holding this class in our own tent at the Garmin exhibit right there in the middle of the Oshkosh show. So you don't have to worry about trying to get to the other side of the airfield. If you are signed up for one of those classes or you're looking to, purchase your seat. They're going to be limited to 12 per class. 6 of our kiosks are going to be set up with GTN and TXI. The other 6 will be set up as GTN and G3X on a first come first served basis there. But if you're interested, we do have room available. Flygarmin.com/training, and feel free to sign up for any one of those courses. For the free seminars in our training tent 1, there's going to be our G3X Touch Academy, and you're going to see a number of different courses from maintenance, installing equipment, to some introduction and many flight scenarios and whatnot there. And you'll kind of see those will fluctuate and kind of rotate throughout the week. But pay attention to those. If you do go to all 6 of those courses and you do sign up, we do have a way to register into those seminars. If you're able to see that you've signed up for all of that, then you will automatically get a free G3X e-learning course just by coming and attending all the training there. On the other tent, and this is where we're going to have some GTN and some Autopilot seminars, from VNAV to approaches to some Autopilot specific seminars, some great resources there. So definitely we hope to see you all there. Hopefully we get to you get some questions answered. And then, of course, during the show itself, we are going to have our pilot and maintenance trainers floating in and around the Garmin exhibit. So feel free if you have more questions and want more training, definitely touch base with one of us, and we'll be more than glad to talk and work with you there at the show. And then if you're not going to the show, or if you want more training outside of what you're seeing at Oshkosh, we do have additional trainings from additional e-learning courses from GFC 500 to G3X, GTN, TXI, incorporating our other integrated flight decks, G1000, 5000, and other courses. We also have our in-person that can be done either in person, or instructor-led training that can be done in person or virtually. Or if you want, we can also create a custom training class for you there as well. So with that said, that is going to bring us up to the end of our presentation today. I want to leave our presentation up for just a little bit. Let any of those questions come in that they may have. If you do have any other questions though outside of that, feel free to email us here to aviationtraining.webinar@garmin.com. Hopefully we've learned a couple things, and that can help us get in and work our way up in Oshkosh. Yeah. Of course, from everybody at the aviation training team, hope you have a wonderful day and hope to see you up at Oshkosh.